Hi y'all, welcome back to the garden. I wanted to check in. It's been a couple weeks. We have officially changed times, so I'm not able to get out here during the weekday after work because it gets dark by the time I get home, or it's getting dark anyway. So over the past week, I've not done a whole lot in the garden, but last weekend was a huge success because I finished my irrigation that I started putting in the spring. If you'll remember, I dug the trenches and then ran all of the PVC to do them. I just did not get a chance to connect the valves and all of that other stuff before it got too hot here, because it got hot really early in May. So I waited till spring to get that done and had been running everything off hose bibs pretty much. And now that I'm done, almost everything except maybe one bed will be run through the irrigation system. The bed that is kind of under the stairs on the back of the house, there's not really a super easy way to get irrigation there, and there's a hose bib that's kind of in that bed anyway. So it will continue to be run all of that. The controller I went with is a 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 system, so the irrigation for the bed that's tapped directly to the hose bib will be a 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 system, and then the irrigation for the rest of the property is 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. And the reason I went with 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 is because I really like their smart home integration and their integration with other accessories. So after I got this running, I have a flow meter on a valve outside as water flows through that will tell me how much water each zone is using, which is really nice. So I got to try that out and calibrate it last weekend. One of the benefits of that is it will detect, one, if my valves are malfunctioning, but it will also tell me if there's a break in the line. So it measures the water flow for the zone an initial time, and after that time, if it detects a higher water flow or a less water flow than what's average, it will either stop the water. So if it detects there's a break and there's just a bunch of water gushing out, that way you're not blowing water into your landscape. Or if there's not enough flow, we know there's a blockage somewhere. So some drip irrigation may not be working correctly. So I'm so glad that's done. And the reason I needed to focus on that is because since it's getting cooler, that whole system needs to be blown out for winter. Here in Ohio and a lot of colder zones, we have to blow out our irrigation systems over winter because our frost line is not typically or is typically deeper than what the pipes are run. And if you don't do that, you have a risk of the valves freezing and busting. So here in colder climates, or anywhere where it could potentially get below freezing for an extended period of time, you want to blow out your systems, just like you don't want to keep a hose attached to the side of your house. But I just wanted to reiterate that this has been a very weird fall. We had our first frost October 14th, I think. It has been 3 weeks, and we had 2 freezes that week. Since that time, we've had a couple frosts, but we've not gotten down to freezing again. And it's made the garden be very weird. There's some plants that lost all their leaves, or their leaves shriveled up, and they're starting to push new growth, which now is not the time, and it really concerns me. Because this has been such a weird fall, I haven't started fall cleanup. So you'll notice all of my perennials here, I've not cut any of them back, and I think I'm going to, I was originally going to do that, and I think I'm going to wait till spring. We've had some leaves blow into the bed to protect them a little bit. But what I fear is that I'll cut them back, and then we'll go to warm temperatures, which it's been a lot in the 70s, even the high 70s over the past few weeks, with almost no rain. We did get rain the other day, thank goodness. But the issue is if we go from hot to cold really quickly, it could damage a lot of these things I planted this year if I cut them back. So I'm not going to be doing a whole lot of cutback of perennials. I'm actually considering not even removing my annuals now. It's getting later than I would like. I might come through and pull them up, but if I just leave them through winter, they will be almost nothing by spring, and it will be easy to take care of in spring as well, because I don't intend to have as many crazy projects next year as I did this year. But let's take a look at the garden beds. As you can see, a lot of these perennials, mentioning the leaves, I'm going to leave those in there. I'm not going to blow those out of the bed. I would recommend you do the same over winter, except with some things, like I'm going to come back through and cut my roses back, because if you don't clean up the roses, you risk perpetuating disease like black spot into the spring. So some of them I'm going to prune back. The climbers are still, like over here on this rose arch, are looking perfectly fine. I didn't trim those last year. I'm probably not going to trim those this year. They're super healthy, no signs of disease. And since they're against the brick, they tend to stay evergreen over winter. And I think that'll be really pretty against the house. But as you can see, all of the trees here since the last video I've shot have lost almost all their leaves. There's a couple hanging around. The hydrangeas under here that I'm testing for the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲 trials. I'm also probably going to, instead of running over these leaves with a lawnmower, I'm probably going to try and blow the leaves into this bed to give it a little bit of protection. Hydrangea 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲s you can protect in winter if you're in a colder zone. I'm not going to do that other than what's naturally here already on the ground, because this is obviously an ultimate test to see how they're going to perform and how early they're going to bloom, even if their buds are killed. So all of these are reblooming, and it's going to be a nice test there. The last video I showed you some trees that I planted, and I've got a couple more. I'm picking up 2 more next week. And one behind me here is pink snow showers crabapple, which is a proven winter's tree, and it is gorgeous. I'll put a picture on the screen of what it looks like. I think it's going to be really nice here. Let me orient you here and see how this looks. So this is how the front of the property looks here. So I placed it here between these 2 maples. This is a proven winter's tree as well, called Midnight Express. It's a red bud. But I think as we back up, it'll be a nice element here in the center towards the property. You can see it's kind of even here between these trees from this view. So anytime I'm placing a tree, I walk all the way around it to kind of see what the vignettes are going to be from the front of the property. You can see it really good too. So I think it's going to be a nice placement there. If you're not familiar, Proven Winners has released a line of trees, and they're bringing some into their program, some really beautiful specimens. All of them are pretty much decorative, but it is a newer program within the past couple of years. So they're adding more to that program. The pink snow showers is relatively new and really beautiful. I've got 2 more that I got this past week, and then I'm getting 2 more the next week. So I'll have almost all of the program here at the house. There'll be a few that I'm missing, but I planted a lot there as well. You know, my bread and butter has been pretty much shrubs, but now that I have the space, I also love incorporating lots of trees, because things to sit under and just take a break while you're gardening and to provide a blockage from wind or privacy are really great. In the next video, I'm going to be taking you along putting a rose trellis on this wall, so stay tuned for that. I'm really excited about it. It's going to match the fence perfectly here, and it's just going to look very incorporated. I do want to redo this wall here in the future. I'm thinking about horizontal slats. I don't love the way it looks now, but for now I'm going to go ahead and put the trellis on there and get this rose, because this is a climbing rose down here called Kiss Me Kate. Really beautiful pink rose, but I want to get that established and going. And then if I ever come back and replace or paint any of this, it'll be easy to remove and cut back the climbing rose, and it'll climb right back up it. But let's take a look at the shrub border briefly. Got some grass creeping in the edges that I need to take care of. So the last thing I did this morning when I came out is planted some tulips in here. I'm not a huge fan of tulips because they don't naturalize very easily like daffodils do. And then they'll stop blooming, and then you just have this green foliage that you got to deal with in spring. And they don't pull up easy here. So I've heard a lot of people, and I've had a lot of comments over the years, they're just like, just pull them up when they're done. We have clay soil, and you can't really pull bulbs out of clay soil after they're rooted in. It's really difficult. You pretty much have to dig them, and then it becomes a really big mess in the spring. But the soil back here in this bed is much more loamy, and so I'm hoping that if these don't naturalize in a couple years and they stop blooming, that I'll just be able to pull those out pretty easily. So you can kind of see where I got some roughed up mulch here where I came through this morning and planted these things. But all of the shrubs that I put in here are looking really good. Now that I've got irrigation back on it, like look at this spirea. So stunning. This is the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲. Like, look at this fall color. It's still very yellow in here in the center, but the outside is orange and red. Really, really nice fall interest. And all of the things that get fall interest are really interesting. One of the things that I thought was really neat that I was not expecting to hold its foliage so much after we had freezes are these potentillas, which is the first edition Shrubs and Trees Marmalade, so the orange blooming one. It looks so good still after the frost and the freezes we've had. So this is another Proven Winners tree called Samurai Sword. It is a Japanese maple type tree, but it is fast growing and gets really large, up to 20 foot tall, and it has more of an oval shape instead of like an open airy shape that a lot of Japanese maples do. But there's a little bit of foliage left on it since we're so far into fall. Most everything's fallen off, so I'll show you these in spring too. And I'll put some pictures on the screen, but it's a really stunning specimen. And this bed, as I've got to come through and put mulch and wood chips down along this whole area, as I mentioned in the last video. This bed is probably going to end here, and then there's a gap. I want to keep a gap to be able to get through from these two beds. And then in the future, I'm trying to think about like a nice boxwood or ornamental like boxwood garden or something here in the center. I don't know. I'm just kind of thinking about stuff to do in the future because I've got a lot of planting spaces really full already in this first year. The swing set bed is looking pretty good except for all the leaves lost on the hydrangeas, but you can definitely see the fall interest here with these oak leaf hydrangeas, how nice and red they are. And those will be really nice and big in future years. So the last two trees I'm going to be planting this year are a Marley's Pink Weeping Styrax, which I love styraxes, also known commonly as snowbells, which they produce those little like ballerina skirt blooms. You know, I already have one on the property called Starway to Heaven, and instead of the ballerina shaped blooms, it opens very upright and looks like a star. And then I have a lollipop crabapple I'm picking up, and I planted one of those at my last garden. It's a small crabapple that grows very much into a ball and can be trained into a ball. And I'm thinking placement for it. I'll show you right quick. So the rose trellis is right here with all of this catmint that I planted a few weeks ago. All the crabgrass is dead from where the geothermal was installed. It got so hot so quickly this year, I did put seed down, but we couldn't keep enough water on it for it to germinate that early. So I'm thinking about putting the lollipop crabapple right kind of in line with this pillar here, or maybe a little bit on the outside, and letting it grow up there, and I can train it, and it'll be also additional interest for this space. As far as these roses, they are still looking so good. This is James Galway. I'm actually getting some blooms on them. It did frost again the other night, so some of the blooms are looking kind of rough. This one was real pretty the other day. Not quite as much anymore, but I've been so impressed with how quickly these have grown from 1-gallon containers this year. Down here, some of the weirdness I was talking about. This is a Midnight Sun 𝗟𝗂𝗲, and it lost all its leaves in the frost, obviously, but it's pushed brand new leaves, which is very weird, but it's just been so warm. You can see all those green buds in there. Very, very odd fall, of course. So for some things left over, I'm going to shoot a video on the trellis I'm installing here. I'm going to shoot a video on fall hydrangea and rose care, and I'll probably get to that next weekend. I still need to do some cleanup. I'm not doing a whole lot. One of those, I never got to removing this viburnum here. This is one of the original shrubs that was here on the house. It's actually 2 shrubs, but it's very big. Very kind of overwhelming for the space, and the hose bib is right behind it, so not a super great placement. So I need to remove this. I'm allergic to this variety viburnum. The last couple that I tried to remove, I was actually having some issues breathing, and I did finish the project, so I'm going to wait till the leaves fall off on this. So depending on our weather, I may not get to it until the spring, but it's going to be something I tackle early before it leaves out, because that will help me be able to remove it easier without such a mess and without such a reaction. But it's just been a weird fall. As I mentioned, I'd like to know how your fall's gone, where you're at. I know we've had very odd weather in general in a lot of places in the country. Something that I noticed this fall that is unusual is I didn't have a lot of rose rebloom on anything other than the 𝗟𝗶𝗸𝗲, which are just so prolific. Some of my roses that I planted last fall produced maybe one bloom. So that was also very weird, even though I cut them back. It was so dry, even on drip irrigation, and then it was so hot, and the weather being up and down and up and down. I'm not sure what it is, but usually I'm used to more rebloom on my roses than what occurred this year. I've still got to move my big concrete container that's by the pool that I mentioned moving in a previous video. I think I'm gonna put it right there, kind of where one of these big grasses were. So it will be an interesting annual element in the center of the bed. I've also contemplated putting it at the front of the border out there. I am still thinking about it, and I'll probably continue to noodle that until I get ready to move it. We just had some rain, and so I should have got the soil out of that before it got wet to make it a little lighter, but I'll use the tractor to help me move it, and that's why I think up there might be easier just to get it into the bed. There were also a couple things in this bed that I intended on moving that I didn't get to, including this Winecraft Black Smoke Bush. This grew maybe double the size the past year. These can get really large. The tags used to say they stayed much smaller than they say now. I might just give it another year and see how it does. I know you can cut these back really heavily and kind of size control them a bit. So we may try in the future see how that can do. I filled up the shrub border around the pool much quicker than I thought I was going to, and there wasn't really a room to move this up there. Another one is this desert orchid called El Nino, which was new to the Proven Winners collection this past year. It grew a lot this year. It started really late though, and I'm not sure if it will die down to the ground in winter. It did pretty much die down to the ground this year. So we'll keep an eye on that and see how it grows probably next spring as well. And I may transplant it as I get some additional beds established, or I'll wait till it goes completely dormant, and then if I have some space where I showed you back there, I'll do that as well. See, look at this beautiful rose trellis here. Isn't this pretty? Thank y'all for joining me on this crazy fall week, and stick around for the remainder of the videos that I'm doing this fall before I tuck myself away for about a month, and then I'll start doing some stuff in January for the spring planting. Thank y'all for joining me, and remember, be a light. Take care. Bye.